This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We are back, and once again, I got something I want to talk at you about. So do me a favor and grab that coffee, stretch your hammies, do your whatever you do, your vocal warm-ups or whatever. Me, and let's get started. So today I want to talk a little bit about human trafficking and some of these big organizations that are dedicated to fighting human trafficking and how they may or may not be related to a couple of current events. I want to start you off over here on the Wikipedia, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Many of you have probably heard of this group already, and if you have not, that's okay because we're going to talk about them a little bit. We are not going to go into a massive dive into this group, even though we probably could. But let me start you with this. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, is a private, nonprofit organization established in 1984 by the United States Congress. In September 2013, the United States House of Representatives, United States Senate, and the President of the United States reauthorized the allocation of $40 million in funding for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as part of Missing Children's Assistance Reauthorization Act of 2013. The current chair of the organization is child safety advocate Patty Wetterling, mother of Jacob Wetterling. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was founded in 1984, spurred by notable child abductions such as the 1981 abduction and murder of 6-year-old Adam Walsh from a shopping mall in Hollywood, Florida, and the 1979 abduction of 6-year-old Ethan Patz from New York City. Because police had the ability to record and track information about stolen cars, stolen guns, and even stolen horses with the FBI's National Crime Computer, it was believed that the same should be done to find child victims and the procurers who exploited them. In 1984, the U.S. Congress passed the Missing Children's Assistance Act, which established a National Resource Center and Clearinghouse on missing and exploited children. On June 13, 1984, the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children, formed by Adam Walsh's parents, Reve and John Walsh, alongside other children's advocates, was officially opened by President Ronald Reagan in a White House ceremony. The national 24-hour toll-free missing children's hotline, 1-800-THE-LOST, was also established. Yeah, you may remember John Walsh also had that TV show, and they were going after a lot of these people for a long time. Primarily funded by the Justice Department, the NCMEC acts as an information clearinghouse and resource for parents, children, law enforcement agencies, schools, and communities to assist in locating missing children and to raise public awareness about ways to prevent child abduction, child sexual abuse, and child pornography. John Walsh, Noreen Gosch, and others advocated establishing the center as a result of frustration stemming from a lack of resources and a national coordination between law enforcement and other government agencies. Okay, so a lot of money gets poured into this NCMEC, and I want to make sure that I'm very clear right off the bat about this. I'm not making any kinds of accusations today. I just want to show you what is, and you can make your own decisions from here. This is a very, very big group, and like a lot of these very big groups, there's usually a lot of really altruistic people that are involved that are doing a lot of good. However, sometimes we run into some people that are in these groups that are not up to so much good, and I want to point a little bit of that out. Now we're over here at missingkids.org. I want to show you some of their curious corporate partners, but before I do want to mention that it was the NCMEC, I guess we can call them NCMEC, a couple of years ago, was very instrumental in helping take down Backpage.com. And of course, this was a website that was related to all sorts of prostitution rings. They were advertising all these crazy ads on their site, and this led to a lot of prostitution rings and of course human trafficking rings. So score one for NCMEC. But they've got some very curious partners that I do want to talk about. And of course, the first one is the largest data collection center in the world, Google, right? And of course, they use this Google Earth Pro. That's how we get Google Maps and all that stuff with their keyhole satellites and whatnot. And of course, they're affiliated with these Amber Alerts. And if you're not familiar with Amber Alerts, there are these alerts that would pop up. Back in the day, a lot of people grew up with them. They would either show up on your on the radio or on TV, and they would give you a quick alert to missing children in your area. Amber Alerts. Now, in my video entitled Connecting a Crisis, which will be linked down below, we talk more about the NCMEC, probably a lot of connections that we won't today. But I tell you the story of one Laura Silsby, and she was arrested moving some kids from the Dominican Republic into Haiti along with her little crew. They all got arrested, and it was a big to-do. And her group was called New Life Refuge. I believe that I'm getting that correct. New Life Refuge. And it was supposedly like a Christian foundation. And they were trying to get these kids out of trouble into an adoption center. And of course, in that video, I show you how that entire process is how many kids are trafficked. So this woman was arrested, and they didn't want to let her go back to the United States. They were going to let everyone else go except for her. Bill Clinton was the one who actually intervened on her behalf. But what was also more curious is that she hired this lawyer. His name was Jorge Puello. And Puello had also been arrested previously for, you guessed it, human trafficking. As a matter of fact, Puello's own wife was already in prison for, you guessed it, human trafficking. Anyway, after this whole to-do, she did make it back to the States. She changed her last name, and she ended up working for Amber Alert. Now, I don't believe she is still there anymore, but she was indeed there, and I tell that whole story in this video, Connecting a Crisis. And like I said, a lot more detail with the NCMEC and some of their other curious connections. But I think Google is curious enough. And of course, Facebook is also very curious. We're talking about DARPA, right? We're talking about LifeLog, which is essentially the project before Facebook began. This is essentially a spy on you 24/7 app. As a matter of fact, side story, just happened to me about an hour ago. My phone popped up with another alert saying that my Facebook was failing to close. Only thing is I don't have Facebook on my phone. Yeah. Then we go to Old Navy, which is, of course, the fashion label. MCOR, they designed this child ID kit and safety app. More data for your kids. Then you've got this Life Touch here. They also use these child ID cards. It's funny how they all want IDs for your kids. That's the way to keep them safe, right? And then we've got Adobe, which they're wrapped up in all kinds of software, good and bad. And then, of course, we have Palantir. And Palantir is a very curious company. This is of course, they've got contracts all over, and they do all kinds of things. But again, satellites, data, all sorts of information technology, artificial intelligence. And if I'm not mistaken, Palantir, yeah, it looks like the logo too. That was the crystal ball used in the Lord of the Rings series. It was the indestructible crystal ball, a lot like the looking glass that would be able to communicate and see into the future. It's probably not relevant. Anyway, LexisNexis, Intel. As you can see, these are all these tech groups and groups that have all kinds of stock in information. And then we've got Disney. And if you followed my channel at all or anything like it, you know that Disney is super suspect and has had a trail of sexual abuse and human trafficking arrests just over the last few years. We're not going to go into them today. And then we have Pokemon. The only thing I want to point out about Pokemon, I didn't grow up with Pokemon or whatever. Maybe some of you are into it or whatever. But if you'll remember a few years ago, they had this Find Pokemon or Pokemon Go. I think it was called Pokemon Go, the app where people were running around finding Pokemon. Keep in mind, we're using mapping again. So all these groups seem to have very similar ideas with how they want to contribute to this NCMEC. And then we've got American Airlines, Celebrite. We could go into all of these. Kohl's, another fashion label there. And then Ring. And if you'll remember, Ring is the app that just recently came under fire. They've got cameras hooked up to your door so they can keep you safe and spy on anybody that comes to your door. Only problem is that it looks like they were using that for the wrong reasons and they ran into some trouble themselves. So you get the idea. We could go off on a whole bunch of these here. Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America has also had their problems over the years. But I just want to point out that a lot of these were big time tech people and they're using big time data. Now, I mentioned Disney, which was already suspect on its own, but there was actually one part of Disney that I found very curious that was giving a lot of money to NCMEC, and that was this club Penguin, which I didn't really know much about. This is an online multiplayer game, and I just want to point out right off the bat that whenever you have these massive online games, multiplayers, multi-servers, you're going to have, of course, chat capabilities, which of course opens the door for lots of stalkers and predators. And if we take you down to the third paragraph right here, it says the game was specifically designed for children aged 6 to 14. Okay, so a massive multiplayer online game designed for kids as young as 6. That sounds like a lot of danger. Let me take you to the second paragraph right here. About halfway through, it says the success of Club Penguin led to New Horizon being purchased by the Walt Disney Company in August 2007 for the sum of $350 million. So this is quite some game, with an additional $350 million in bonuses should specific targets be met by 2009. Okay, so this has all kinds of red flags in my opinion, and I went looking online for some images, and I was able to find a little bit. It was obviously everybody uses a penguin avatar in this game, but there were a lot of pizza references. I just want to point that out. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. A lot of pizza references, but this is very curious indeed. Now, they do have this private server. They're known as a CPPS, online multiplayer game that is not part of Club Penguin, but uses SWF files from Club Penguin, a database and a server emulator in order to create a similar environment for the game. Many now use these environments in order to play the original game after its discontinuation. Okay, so this is very curious indeed, and this would seem like a great way to exchange messages with young ones in a very, very innocent looking fashion. Now, NCMEC is related to IPOT, and that's the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Here is their website, and we're not going to cover all their donors, but there's a whole long list of them, and they're very influential, but there you go. Now, I want to thank V4 Vapid, who actually did a great collection of threads a few years ago on Steemit, of which I will link down below for you, but I want to borrow a couple of these graphics right here. In 1996, Belgium was shaken by tragedy. A man named Marc Dutroux, an unemployed electrician and father of 3, had over the course of many years committed a series of kidnappings, rapes, and killings of a still unknown number of teenage girls, called the Dutroux Affair. The episode galvanized Belgium, and more than 300,000 Belgian citizens came together to express their anger and frustration in the handling of the case in the now famous White March. And of course, this is what led to the formation of IPOT. It was another one of these massive scandals that was going on, and of course Belgium was absolutely freaked out about it. More than 300,000 citizens. So this was a big deal, and then they ended up forming this as a result of this perceived success from NCMEC. But what I really want to point out is that one of the founders of this group was one Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's right, co-founder of the IPOT in 1998, former First Lady of the U.S., former U.S. Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013, and of course, member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, what's really, really curious about IPOT are that there are a number of people from the Council of Foreign Relations involved in this center. I would really love it if somebody from Belgium would actually do a video on this, because he could probably do it a lot better than myself, but a lot of knuckleheads wrapped up in IPOT. So those are just a few of many connections between IPOT and NCMEC that I think are worth our attention. And like I said, I'm not here to make any indictments or any endorsements, but I do think they're very curious, and I do think they're very relevant. Sir Richard Branson is another one that is wrapped up with this group, sat on the board of directors for quite some time. And there's been a lot of talk that the Podesta brothers are involved in these groups too. I don't know that to be true. I'm assuming from my own research that the reason why is because there is a senior analyst over there at NCMEC by the name of Brian Podesta, who many think might be a relation, and that might be true, but it also might be false. So I don't think it's fair to say that just based on a last name. But I will say this, I did show you that Hillary Rodham Clinton was indeed the co-founder of IPOT. So I would assume if that's the case, and it is, that John Podesta at the very least would know about these groups. Whether or not he actually participates, I don't really know. But to think that he wouldn't know about it would seem a little bit illogical too. So there you go. But I do want to point this out. Now, this is an article from Oxygen, and this was published here on November of 2019. But the story actually goes back a little ways. Why were the Millbrook twins removed from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children database? How could two missing twins be deemed found, leading to their names being removed from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children database? It seems like a nearly impossible mistake to have been made when the twins have not been seen in decades. Danette and Jeanette Millbrook were 15 when they vanished from Augusta on March 18, 1990, never to be seen again. Since then, there have been a series of perceived missteps. The initial officer on the case got the girls' names wrong on the missing persons report, according to Fall Line Podcast. Then, those original Sheriff's Department records on the case were lost, according to the Charlie Project, an online database of missing people that have been gone at least 1 year. And here is a screenshot from the Charlie Project, which appears to just be another one of these projects here. It seems to be much, much smaller. According to the twins' mother, Mary Louise Sturgis, the first investigator on the case, Jim Shipp, then with the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, told her that he thought the girls were likely runaways, something she found implausible. They weren't the type of girls that stayed out like that. They always went to school, and when they got out of school, they came straight home, Sturgis told producers of The Disappearance of the Millbrook Twins, an upcoming special on Oxygen. The family told the Fall Line Podcast creators, who dedicated a season of the podcast to the case, that Shipp visited them in April of 1991 and told them that the case had been closed because the twins had turned 17 and could no longer be legally made to come home. In 1993, the family told producers they got a call from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, letting them know that it was reported to them that the twins had been found. The family, however, still had never seen them. Who had told the NCMEC that they had been found? During the production of The Disappearance of the Millbrook Twins, Shipp, now retired, agreed to meet with Laura Coates, a former federal prosecutor and one of the investigators giving the case a new look for Oxygen. He did not agree for their discussion to be filmed, but confirmed that he was the one who told NCMEC the girls had been seen, although he had never laid eyes on them himself. Okay, that's really curious. According to Coates, when she asked him why he did that, Shipp said it was because he thought it was an open case that should have been closed. So he's never seen these kids, and he just thought it was an open case that should be closed. Shipp said he had been told that they had been seen by people in the community, including the principals at the teen school. Coates said the principal had since passed away, so she couldn't corroborate Shipp's claim. Okay, so this is pretty wild, and this got reopened back in 2013, but the point that I want to make is I just showed you a plethora of connections with the NCMEC and the ICMEC to multiple intel groups, tech groups, groups that have satellites, groups that do mapping, groups that do facial recognition, groups that have your data. They've got all this data, and squillions of dollars are going into these groups to make sure that they get even more of your data. As a matter of fact, that seems to be the general theme of all the people that are donating to this group and trying to help find these kids, is that they want to implement their little way of getting more and more data. So how is it that we, with all this data, we would get their names wrong and just change and say that they'd been found, say that this case that was open needed to be closed? It doesn't make any sense. Not with all this data. And I guess that's my point, is that a lot of these groups here seem to have all this access to all of our data, all of our children's data, and yet these children don't seem to be found on a mass scale. Now, I'm not indicting anyone, and I do think that NCMEC, like I just pointed out with Backpage.com, from time to time is doing some good, as a lot of these groups are, and it's hard to know which ones are good and which ones are bad. And I guess that's the importance of us doing our own due diligence and our own research into these groups. But NCMEC and IPMEC have had quite a few problems over the years, and they're problems just like this that seem to be solved real easily if you just put a little bit more money into this data acquisition. Well, they're getting plenty of money to do it, and yet it doesn't seem like they really have the success numbers to back it up. Now, before we move on, let me make one last connection that I do think is important. I was talking earlier about Palantir. with their crystal ball logo. This is from their own website. Since 1980, the United States has sustained 144 weather or climate disasters that each resulted in $1 billion or more in damages. There were 11 such disasters in 2012. In the wake of Hurricane Sandy, the largest disaster of 2012, we learned from our work with Team Rubicon and Direct Relief International that our software could help aid organizations harness a sea of goodwill and focus it where it's needed most. In 2013, we were proud to expand our philanthropy engineering efforts on the disaster relief front by creating a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action. Okay, so we do see that, at least in a roundabout way, more Clintons. Wherever there's a kid, there's a Clinton. And here's my point here, and I think Haiti is really such a classic example of how so much of this works. This is a place that is always getting torn apart with some sort of weather or hurricane problems, climate issues, whatever you want to call it. They're always getting hit. And of course, when that happens, homes get ruined, families get displaced, children get displaced. And in that sort of situation, then you get groups like the American Red Cross, UNICEF, the Clinton Foundation, whomever it might be, United Way, running in with their philanthropy and taking care of everybody. And of course, with these displaced kids, you get a lot of undocumented kids. And of course, they step in with their apps and we'll track you and we'll figure out where your kids are. But the fact of the matter is that in situations like this, and we saw this very clearly in a situation like Haiti, this is a prime time to steal kids away. Now, I'm not saying Palantir is doing that. I'm not necessarily saying the Clinton Global Initiative is doing that. And I'm not necessarily saying that NCMEC is doing it. But we do know that it's being done. Now, let me take you over to the NCMEC site again, because they got a new thing that they're rocking. They're rocking one sock. Interesting. The Rock One Sock campaign. It's a simple way to show your support for missing children and their families. Just wear one sock, and then you take a picture of it on Instagram. You send it to them so that they can have more of your data. And then you can donate, because that's always welcome. So there you go. Another really curious thing going on here. This whole one sock thing seems a little bit suspect to me. It seems like wearing one sock seems like something's missing. I don't know. Just by looking at those pictures, it doesn't look quite right. And maybe I've got this all wrong. It's very, very possible. But I thought this was very sketchy. Well, somebody else that I know that's always talking about one sock is one Tom Hanx. I posted this the other day on Twitter. This was a post from Tom Hanks' Twitter on March 7th. Kids sock washed ashore, lost ashore, Bondi Beach, New South Wales, Hanx. Okay, creepy. Well, first of all, this doesn't look like a sock that was washed ashore. This looks like a pretty clean sock. It's inside out, maybe, but it still looks pretty clean. So it looks like Tom Hanks is in Australia. Tweeting about one sock. Well, this is something that Tom Hanks seems to have a little fixation on. Here is just a small collection from his Instagram. As you can see, Tom's very fond of picking out either one shoe or one glove or a baby pacifier or all kinds of clothing, usually just one. This one actually has two, though, to be honest, but the other ones all seem to be just shoes or gloves that are missing their other half. And that seems very curious for a guy of Tom Hanks' stature, doesn't it? Well, like I said, I'm not in the business of trying to make any indictments here, but I do want to point out that Tom Hanks was wrapped up in some accusations a while back from one Sarah Ruth Ashcraft, and you can see these are a collection of her tweets here. I want to read the top middle one here. This is me at 13. The age I was when Tom Hanks purchased me from my father for sex as a dissociated mind control doll. I wonder how much he paid. I wonder how much dollars my father made for breaking my mind and selling my child body throughout my life. Will I ever get to know? Well, if you want to know more about her story, you can follow her at Sarah Ashcraft on Twitter. Some pretty compelling stuff. I want to move over to the top right one here because she's actually talking about this one shoe thing. And I know it's a little bit blurry. Sorry. It says the left-hand shadow is pretty obvious, equals left-handed path, occultism, witchcraft, Rosicrucian. I'm not sure what the one shoe thing is. I drew this in April of 2017 from part of a memory of my hashtag mind control training when I was young, wandering around a big building, missing my left shoe. Okay, so it does seem very suspicious, doesn't it? And then of course at the bottom right there you see another one shoe that Tom Hanks found. And of course you may all remember the movie The Man with the One Red Shoe that he starred in a while back. And this, of course, had to do with intelligence agencies, oddly enough. He was actually being targeted for wearing one red shoe, where that was a prank that was played on him. And then, of course, hijinks ensue and all the intelligence agencies going after him thinking he's a spy. But this was an older movie. Now, of course, you see in the bottom left, Steven Spielberg has also been implicated in some things with Sarah Ruth Ashcraft. And, of course, there was the actor who passed away a couple years ago, Isaac Cappy, who was also coming out saying a lot of the same things. Right around the time of Isaac Cappy's death, we saw a mysterious tweet from Tom Hanks with a glove on the side of the road. So there was a lot of really curious things going on there, and there were people that were actually covering this story a lot more in depth than I was. So you can probably find a lot of this stuff online if you want to get a better idea. I'm just trying to paint a general picture here. But Tom Hanks went through a bit of some issues with this in regards to Sarah Ruth Ashcraft. And here was a really curious one from February 21st, and this was actually right around the time I was talking about Patton Oswalt and his connections to Tom Hanks. But this was the tweet: "Part these socks for me, Hanks." And the only thing I want to point out here is that we see some curious stickers on the pole. If you can see on the top of the pole there, seems to be a skull and crossbones with a, looks like a scythe on the top, and it says "Best wishes." And then we've got a, what appears to say Rook sticker and an SF28 something 280 or whatever. But either way, really creepy. Another pair of socks found on the side of the road from Tom Hanks. So is there a connection to all this? Well, you can decide for yourself, but I find it very curious that Tom Hanks seems to always want to be tweeting about these singular socks, singular gloves. I guess they're not always singular, but I think I've shown enough to show that there seems to be some sort of fixation right there. And of course, we have Sarah Ruth Ashcraft, who claims that Tom Hanks abused her and also seems to have memories of singular socks and singular shoes. And this all comes at a time where we have a senator that seems to also be under suspicion very often in regards to child exploitation and human trafficking, happens to be rocking the one sock promotion. Now, you'll notice that Tom Hanks' tweet seems to be in New South Wales. That would be Australia. Bondi Beach, BB. That made me think about Bill Barr. And incidentally, Bill Barr's in the news talking about child trafficking. Yeah, that's right. Barr is poised to make an announcement today. This was from the 5th, backed by leaders from Australia. That's funny because we were just talking about Canada, New Zealand, and the UK on the Justice Department's efforts to address child sexual abuse online. Officials are set to unveil a set of 11 voluntary principles that target child exploitation. The Washington Post reported earlier this week. The proposal, crafted with the industry's aid and backed by leaders of 5 countries, called on tech companies to ensure search, social networking, video streaming, and chat tools aren't haven for child predators. Boy, it's almost like everything we were just talking about. Between the lines, watch for whether those principles touch on encryption and how they might advance Barr's anti-encryption agenda. The Attorney General has long attacked tech companies' commitment to end-to-end encryption, suggesting that the technology hampers law enforcement's abilities to crack down on child exploitation and other public safety issues like domestic terrorism. Industry and privacy advocates, meanwhile, have argued that Barr is seizing on these issues to pressure tech platforms, notably Facebook and Apple, to create government backdoors. Okay, so all this is probably just interesting timing and strictly coincidental. And of course, when I think about odd coincidences and interesting timing, I think the only thing that could top this off would be a strange dog tweet. And we got one from the 8th, from New York Post. Marnie, the Instagram famous lopsided dog, dead at age 18. And you gotta admit, even despite the dumb looking pumpkin outfit, it's a pretty cute little dog. Marnie, the adorable Shih Tzu who captured the internet's hearts with her wild tongue, has died. It is with much grief I share this news that Marnie passed away painlessly and peacefully in my home on Thursday afternoon at the age of 18. Her owner, Shirley Braha, wrote on Instagram on Saturday. Her comfort had been notably declining over the past few days with little hope for improvement, and she let me know she had had enough. She enjoyed her chicken until the very end. I guess she was a chicken eater. Marnie was born in 2001 and was adopted from a shelter in Connecticut in 2012. She amassed 1.8 million followers on Instagram. Boy, she was in that shelter for a long time. Celebrities including Tina Fey, Joe Jonas, Demi Lovato, and James Franco have posed with the pup, who used to live in New York City. Okay, so they're going to go ahead and bury her In LA, Braha hopes to host a public memorial, though will do so when safe due to coronavirus. Well, that's awful nice of you. Marnie had become an inspiration for others to adopt older dogs, Braha posted. When I hear from people that Marnie has made them adopt their senior dogs, it's truly the most beautiful legacy she and I could hope to leave in this world. Okay, so very interestingly enough, we have this dead Instagram famous dog named Marnie. Now, if you don't understand what I'm talking about here, I highly suggest you check out my video entitled Very Good Boy. I have spent the better part of a couple years talking about all these strange dog tweets and how some of them may be related to some communications going back and forth between Hollywood celebrities, government officials, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI. Pretty much everybody has been involved in this. And I've done this for quite some time, so please go check out my video entitled Very Good Boy, because we are not going to go explaining that. But indeed, this Marnie popped up. Now, of course, when I was thinking about Marnie, the name was a little bit familiar, although I couldn't really think of a particular actor that would be nicknamed or named Marnie. But I did find this. Well, what about Marnie Marie Michaels, which is not a real name, it's a character name. She's portrayed by actress Allison Williams. This is one of the lead characters in HBO's Girls. Now, I don't want to go way into this because this is a bio from Girls Wiki, and this is just in regards to the character, but she is portrayed by this Allison Williams. Now, you might be saying, Patrick, this seems like a bit of a stretch. We were talking about Tom Hanks and dogs and missing socks and a dog named Marnie. Seems like a little bit of a stretch to equate it to an Allison Williams. After all, Allison Williams isn't dead. However, we had this from just the other day. Allison Williams dead, 2020. Actress killed by internet death hoax. Okay, so this is really wild. We have this death hoax, and we've seen quite a few of these. And the reason why I think this is actually something really suspect is because we had a similar situation earlier, or I should say later last year, with a Disney star by the name of Cameron Boyce, who did have an internet death hoax just like this, only to turn up dead later for real. And this was after he had come out accusing one of his former managers of sexual abuse. So this was very, very strange. And let me just dial you in right here at about 11 a.m. ET on Friday, March 6, 2020. Boy, that was just the other day when all these tweets were going on. Our beloved actress Allison Williams passed away. Allison Williams was born on November 30th, 1987 in New Canaan. She will be missed but not forgotten. Please show your sympathy and condolences. Well, she was 32 years old, they're reporting. 32. There's that pesky 3223 that we've been talking about so much, the cabal numbers that so many people like to use. Well, Allison Williams doesn't appear to be dead at all, but I found it very interesting that she had a death hoax going on right around the same time. And I'm sure that it's also just a coincidence that back in 2015, our Marnie Michaels, otherwise known as Allison Williams, who married her longtime boyfriend, College Humor co-founder Ricky Van Veen on a ranch out west on September 19th. And she invited all kinds of celebrities like Katy Perry, John Mayer, Bruce Springsteen, Andy Cohen, Lena Dunham, Jemima Kirk, Mindy Kaling, and of course her famous father, who just happens to be NBC anchor Brian Williams. Yeah, how about that? But it gets even more cooler because the woman who plays her mother on the hit show Girls just so happens to be Rita Wilson, who just so happens to be the wife of one celebrity actor, Tom Hanks. That's right. And not only was Tom Hanks at the wedding, he got ordained for about $35 to officiate Allison Williams' wedding. No, probably just coincidental though. And let me leave you with one last coincidence. This tweet was from Dan Scavino just the other day on the 8th, who tweeted this cool little meme of President Trump playing a sweet little ditty on his fiddle. And he says, my next piece is called Nothing Can Stop What's Coming. Where have we heard that before? And if you don't know, you better ask somebody. Q has mentioned this numerous times on numerous Q posts. And of course, that sent a bunch of people into a frenzy. And one person who took notice was the President of the United States. Donald J. Trump, who tweeted this just today. Who knows what this means? But it sounds good to me. Sounds good to me too, ladies and gentlemen. And that is all I've got for you for now. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. If you're following me on YouTube, please check below in the video description for the links to the show and all the other show notes, as well as my alternate links to my alternate channels. I highly suggest you join me on one of those other platforms just in case I go down on your preferred one. They're all linked down below, as well as my email if you've got information for me. My P.O. box is down there if you want to send me something old school. And if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon is also linked down below. It's all in the video description. And until next time, stay Pesite.